So that's what we're going to be doing now. We're going to be going to the Word, unpacking the Word, and what does the Word say of how to glorify Him. Again, we're working our way through a question that the Corinthians asked Paul roughly 2,000 years ago. They're asking, what about virgins? What about the betrothed? What about those who aren't married? As we looked at last week, the first two reasons Paul gives in his authoritative opinion. It's still authoritative, it's in the Word of God, but it is his opinion why one should stay single if at all possible. Why one should stay single if at all possible. And remember, those who remain single need to have the spiritual gift of singleness. And even if one does have the spiritual gift of singleness and chooses to get married, it is not sinning. It is very clear in the Word, it is not sinning. But Paul does give his opinion here that we will be better off. Those who are single, that's not me, but those who are single will be better off if they choose to stay single. We looked at the first two reasons last week. The first one was the present distress. The present distress the Corinthians were facing. Most likely it was an intense persecution that either had already started or was about ready to start. Because Nero had been in power for 2 years. 2 years when Paul wrote this letter in Corinth. And we learned, those that have studied the history of Nero, he was very, very, well, he's just a madman, honestly. He was a madman that persecuted Christians very severely. As I said last week, he used to sew them up in animal skins and throw them to wild dogs. And we're talking wild dogs. We're not talking the little pets you have at home. Wild dogs are not nice. Those of you that don't know that. And also he used to put them in clothes that were soaked in wax and tie them to trees in his personal garden and light up the garden by lighting Christians on fire. So that could have been, most likely, that was possibly the present distress that the Corinthians were facing. We also know from church history that even one of their own was a very early church martyr, Erastus. As he's also mentioned at the end of the book of Romans, he was an official of the city of Corinth. He was most likely the treasurer of Corinth, and he was martyred. He was martyred under the reign of Nero. So the Corinthians were definitely facing persecution. And Paul says, because of persecution, because of the present distress, it's better to remain single, if at all possible. I mean, we know this. It's common sense. If we are under major persecution today, and you were single, and were able to remain single, your life would be easier, practically easier, not having to worry about a spouse or family. The second reason that Paul gave us that we looked at last week, it is better to remain single, again, if you have the gift, and if all possible, is because of the problems of the flesh. The problems of the flesh. And what did Paul mean by that? Paul is just pointing out that even when two believers get married, two redeemed people get married, they all both bring in their personal wants, desires, different styles, the way they love, everything, and they become one. That can cause heat, and most of the time that does cause heat. That marriage may solve some problems, it may also cause other problems that need to be worked out over time. So again, Paul is just saying on a practical level, it's easier to stay unmarried if you have the gift of singleness and if at all possible. Marriage, God did not intend marriage to resolve and fix all personal problems we looked at last week. That's between you and Him, you and the Holy Spirit. He will lead you in that. Does He use marriage to help in that? Absolutely. Absolutely. But there will be difficulties in marriage because of our sinfulness. When two sinners get married, stuff happens, as we all know. All can attest to that. From the greatest marriages to ones that are struggling. There's always heat. But marriage is also a great place to show forgiveness to your spouse and to be an example to the world of Christ and His bride. Christ and His bride. Again, Paul is not having a low view of marriage here. We know in Ephesians he wrote that marriage represents Christ and His bride. He does not have a low view of marriage. But today we're going to look at the third reason, and probably only the third reason. You might get out a little early. But I don't want to go into the fourth reason. But the third reason Paul gives to stay single, if at all possible, is the passing world. The passing world. Or you could say the passing of marriage. The passing of marriage. When John Piper wrote his book on marriage, his title of his book was this momentary marriage. I've mentioned this before. Marriage is not a permanent thing. God has instituted marriage in this world. God has blessed marriage in this world. But it's not going to be when we get there. It's not going to be men and women when we get to heaven. The marriage vow will be null and void. Jen will not be my wife in heaven. April will not Aaron's wife in heaven. We will be married to our bride. And when that marriage ceremony happens, and I believe it's going to happen at the marriage feast with the lamb that was slain, he is our bridegroom. Everything else is null and void. No mother and daughter relationships. No sisters and brothers besides brothers and sisters in Christ. That's what's happening. This world system, as we know it, marriages in this world system is passing away. That's why Piper titled his book, This Momentary Marriage, which again is a beautiful thing. We're going to focus in today on this third reason the world is passing away. Marriage is passing away from verses 29 through 31. And I would like to read them again. Verses 29 through 31. And I say this, brothers, the time is limited. So, from now on, and those who have wives should be as though they had none. Those who weep as though they did not weep. Those who rejoice as though they did not rejoice. Those who buy as though they did not possess. And those who use the world as though they did not make full use of it. For this world in its current form is passing away. Verse 31 really sums up that section, that little mini section, if you will, within our bigger passage that Aaron read this morning. For the world in its current form is passing away. Is passing away. Again, God instituted marriage, God blessed marriage, but marriage in its current form is what? Passing away. It is not going to be around forever. Not going to be around forever. It represents Christ and his bride, but even in all that, it's passing away. That's what Paul is saying here. Verse 39. And what passes away marriage? Death. Death. If you are married today and your spouse dies, Scripture says you are free to marry again. But just think of the spouse that dies, though, that is a believer. When they die, they're released from that marriage also, and they go to be married with who? And that marriage is consummated. Christ, their very Savior, the bridegroom. That's why Paul reminds us of this in verse 39 at the end of our passage. A wife is bound as long as her husband is living. But if her husband dies, she is free to be married to anyone she wants, only in the Lord. So again, as it's been mentioned, what releases us from the bond of marriage? Death. When a spouse dies, the marriage covenant is over. And a widow or a widower is free to marry again. But only another Christian. Only another Christian. Again, we'll dig deeper into that later on when we get there. But marriage, the marriage covenant is null and void. Null and void. Why? Again, I've mentioned that. I don't want to beat this to death, but this present system, even though it's been ordained by God, is passing away. Is passing away. Jesus said it like this in Matthew 22:30. For in the resurrection, that day, when we will be reunited with our bodies again, in the resurrection, they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are like angels in heaven. That's what's coming for all believers. That's what's coming for all of us. We will be married to him. His bride will be complete. At the marriage banquet, his bride will be complete. You guys realize that? There's not going to be anybody missing. That's going to be a full party. Every single person that's supposed to be there will be there. What a day that will be. But that's not how it works now. That is not the present system we are in. And Paul was reminding us of that today in this passage. This system of the world will be no more. Think about that. The system as we know it will be no more. How does that make you feel? I rejoice in that. I hope you do too. The system of the world will be no more. But what's coming? What's coming? We had a great discussion on this Wednesday night in Bible study. What system is coming? Our full inheritance. What is our full inheritance? Him. God Himself. God Himself. And I pray that you long for that day. I mentioned this to Bob Friday, who was talking about his dad still alive in a nursing home down in Florida, and he's not even be able to go see him. Since February, I think you mentioned, Bob, he can't even see his dad, which is horrible in a sense. But I remember, I think I may have mentioned this before, with my grandfather, years ago, when my niece and nephew, who's married and now is an assistant pastor down in Florida, were 3 or 4 years old. My grandmother were out visiting, and she's like, I want to make it to their graduation. And my grandfather said, I don't want to go that long. I understand that on a different level now. It wasn't that he wanted to die. He just knew where he was going was better than this present system. One day we all will be meeting our Savior face to face, those who have trusted in Him. And I hope we all are grateful and thankful and are amazed that this current system, the curtain will be brought down. World history will have an end. It will have an end. And Paul is saying because of that, if you are able, it's better to stay unmarried so you don't get caught up in this system. Even though this system is beautiful, God has ordained marriage and everything in it. Yes, the Bible gives a beautiful picture of marriage, and it is a beautiful thing. But it's very easy to get caught up in what God has intended to be beautiful to something that is not, even in marriages. Think of this. We have the Scriptures. The Scriptures tell us what? What did the Catechism just say? They tell us how to enjoy and glorify God, right? It's the only place we can go to do that. Does this book, this divinely inspired, God-breathed book, explain to us who He is? Yeah. And every time we read it, we get a bigger and bigger and bigger picture of who He is and who we're not. He should become bigger, we should become smaller. But even if we knew this book in and out, God gave us all wisdom. Do you think we can truly fathom what it's going to be like on that day? I don't think I can. Do you think we truly will understand when we see Him face to face? I hope we never lose the wonder. I told this to the group yesterday. If you want to pray for me, pray that I never lose the wonder of who He is and never lose the urge to learn about Him more and more. Because that's what this is. But even in that, my study, our praying to Him, our study of Him, that's passing away. Why? Because we're going to meet Him face to face. We're going to meet Him face to face. Not like Moses met Him on the mountain, where he just got a little glimpse. We're going to meet Him face to face. And yes, we will see loved ones that have gone before. But I will honestly say there's always a hitch in my spirit when I talk to people like, oh, I can't wait to the day where I can see my grandfather again. And they talk about all the family members that went on before. What about Him? What about Christ and what He's done? What about Him? Again, I will see my grandfather, my grandmother, and I look forward to that day. I have a sister I've never met, an older sister that lasted a couple days after she was born. I long to see the day I'll meet her. But that's not the big inheritance, people. It's Him. And I am so thankful this world is passing away. And Paul again gives us a sober reminder of these truths. This system, as we know today, will not be the system of heaven. It's not going to be the way it happens in heaven. But this system that we live in today, the world that we live in today, has what? He says it has a time limit. No matter how long God keeps this present system going, each of us also has a time limit. We have a time limit within this system, if He doesn't bring the curtain down on human history. Paul is urging people to acknowledge and recognize that truth and live accordingly. Think about this, and we have been blessed in this congregation to have some older people. But I'm assuming if you would talk to Bake or Pat right now, they would say their life went like this. Went like that. I could blow out these candles. And what would happen? You'd see a puff of smoke. If I blew again, what would happen to that smoke? Just gone. Just gone. This is what James said. He said, you don't even know what tomorrow will bring, what your life will be. For you are like smoke that appears for a little while, then vanishes. Again, as if you live 150 years. Compared to eternity, how long is that? I can't make that fast enough. If you live less than 50. So what is Paul saying in all of this? In light of that, your time is limited. Your time is limited. Marriage, and listen to me carefully here, marriage can be a trap in that. We can get caught up within our marriages thinking this is the end all of everything. Even believers. Paul is saying, live like you're unmarried. Is he saying, okay, I can live like I'm unmarried. I don't have to be a godly husband. I don't have to be a godly father. I don't have to be... No, that's not what he's saying. That is not what he's saying. Do not take that out of context here. What is Paul saying? He's just saying it's easier to be unmarried and not get distracted to follow him, if at all possible. Marriage can glorify God, and marriage can also distract us from fulfilling our glorification to Him. Marriage is not an end-all within itself. Is your goal throughout life to find a spouse, fall in love, live with them, and my life will be complete? What is that? That's an idol. That's an idol. If that's your goal in life, I just want to have kids, which again are great blessings given to us by God, given to us on loan from God to train them up in what? His ways. So what is your purpose? Our purpose, as we know, is to glorify Him and enjoy Him forever. It's not to glorify our wives and enjoy them forever. It's not to glorify our husbands and enjoy them forever. Again, do not take that out of context and say, oh, I don't have to go home and do this now. Pastor said I'm good to go. I don't have to listen to you anymore. You're not my husband. This system's passing away. I can do what I want. That is not what I'm saying. But on a practical level, as Paul is saying here, marriage can be a distraction of your life's main purpose. There has to be a balance. It cannot get weighed down on either side. Can't get weighed down on either side. That's why Paul says again, if able, remain single. He's saying it's easier to remember that life is just a vapor if you remain single. That's what he's saying. And then again, sooner or later, we will be out of this system. It's easier to remember that if you're single. Marriage can distract. It can distract us from keeping our focus on our upcoming inheritance. Again, it can distract. We can get caught up in thinking, again and again, marriage is an end of all. It's the end of all ends. It is what it is. We need to get married. I'm good to go. I'm married now. Everything's going to be fine. We can get comfortable. We can get comfortable. I just thought of Shauna when I was writing this sermon, the lady that was died. Jen said she was 40. This lady was probably more physically fit than all of us put together. Very healthy, 40-year-old. Home alone, chokes, done. Sometimes I wonder, I have close friends I haven't seen in a year because they don't want to come out of their house because of COVID. We need to be careful. It's still out there, but we gotta live, people. We gotta live. Life is limited. We have a time limit. I think Calvin says it well. When he's talking, Calvin in context here, this quote I'm about to read, he's speaking to believers who think they have more time than they actually do. And that's what marriage can do, Paul is saying. It may think you give you more time than you actually do. Well, I can do my marriage for a little while, and years later I'll serve the Lord. No, it's all at the same time. But listen to Calvin when he's talking to believers who think they have more time than they actually do. He says, hence, it is not without good reason that the apostle, with the view of arousing us from this stupidity, call us to consider the shortness of this life, and infers from this that we ought to use all things of this world as if we did not use them. For the man who considers that he is a stranger in this world uses the things of this world as if they were another's. That is, as things that are lent to us for a single day. You hear the wisdom in that? I may not be here tomorrow. You guys know this. You may lose a spouse tomorrow. A man lost his wife home alone choking when she was 40. But aren't you glad this system is passing away? You may lose a child tomorrow, God forbid. All Christians can lose sight of this. They can lose sight. It's easier to lose sight of this, Paul is saying, if one is married, in Paul's opinion. His opinion. Again, if nothing else, I hope you leave here today and realize this system is passing away. There will be no husbands in heaven. Christ will be our bridegroom. There will be no mothers and daughters relationships in heaven. This world system is passing away. No father and son. God is our Father. Paul says these verses so we keep a proper perspective on what our marriages are. To glorify Him. What is the primary focus of a Christian? Whether married or single, I think Colossians 3:2 says it well. Our primary focus should be on things that are above, not on things that are on earth. Why? He says why in Colossians 3:1. So if, and that if refers to since you are Christ now, so if you have been raised with the Messiah, seek what is above, where the Messiah is, seated at the right hand of God. And think about this on a practical level. As Christ said, seek the kingdom of God first. What happens with everything else? Your marriages will improve. You will become a better dad. You will become a better wife. God works all those things out if we seek Him first. That's what He was saying, I believe, when He said, you must hate your mother and father and brother and sister. Not that we hate. I don't hate my wife. I don't hate my children. But compared to the love we have for Him, compared to the love we should have for Him, it shouldn't even compare. Shouldn't even compare. And where is God working on you in this? He's going to be working you on a different scenario than He's working on me, or working on John, or working on Big, or working on D. Don't think somebody needs to be where you're at. It's a process. It's a process. Paul also gives us proper perspective on even our emotions in this passage. Keep a proper perspective on our emotions. Those who weep as though they do not weep. Those who rejoice as though they do not rejoice. There are many things that can grieve us in this world. I've mentioned some of them already. The loss of a loved one, a spouse, a child, a brother, a sister, a close friend, many things. And those are just some of the big ones. But what Paul is saying is that we, as believers, should be able to control our emotions to the point where we do not shut down. Have you ever known anybody that lost a mom, a brother, or a sister, and they just shut down in life? Or something else? Paul is saying, this world is passing away. In light of what is coming, you should be able to control yourselves, your emotions, and keep them in perspective. Because of an eternal focus. And honestly, because of the love of God that he has for us. Just think of the eternal focus. Paul is not saying, do not grieve. But keep your grieving in perspective with an eternal view in mind. Keep it in perspective of the next system, if you will, heaven's system. He will wipe away the tears from our eyes. We should not be emotionless when tragic things happen. I can't imagine going up to Shonda's husband right now, when he just lost his wife unexpectedly, saying, even if he was a believer, saying, oh, don't worry, she's in heaven. Everything's good. You just need to get over it. No, that's not what Paul is saying. We should grieve with those that are grieving. We should be sorry to hear about a tragic event in their lives. We should surround them with love and just be there, even if we don't say a word. True love will do that. But true love will also keep a proper perspective. One commentator said it well on this. He said, the mature Christian does not fall apart and lose all hope and purpose and motivation when tragic things happen. Did you hear that? A mature Christian does not fall apart and lose all hope and purpose and motivation when tragic things happen. Why? Why don't we fall apart? Again, I love my wife and she knows it. But if Jen goes away, if she dies this week, if I fall apart, what is that saying about me? Should I grieve and mourn the loss of my wife? Absolutely. But if I fall apart, my hope is in who? In Jen. And this system's passing away. One day I will lose my wife. I will lose my spouse if I don't go first or we don't go together. That's our prayer, by the way. Matt has to throw the party if we die together. But tragic things are going to happen. Mature Christians do not fall apart and lose all hope and purpose and motivation when tragic things happen. Again, that doesn't say you're fine, everything's hunky-dory. But we have a different hope. Our inheritance, my inheritance isn't in Jen, it's in Christ alone. Proper perspective, as Paul is saying. We can do the same thing with rejoicing in this world. We can do the same thing in rejoicing in this world. And things should be celebrated. Things should be celebrated. But they need to be celebrated with an eternal perspective. What if you have a long-lost uncle that leaves you $1 million? Is that going to make your day? I have to think about these things. There's many things I can mention. You may get a new job that doubles your pay or a promotion that does that. Paul says, what about that? Passing away. It's passing away. Again, those are things that are good things. We may get very excited if a conservative woman is nominated, and well, she's already been nominated, and confirmed to the Supreme Court. Would that be exciting to us? Would that be a good thing for the country? I think so. I think so. But is it exciting? COVID could disappear right now and be gone forever. Would you be excited about that? Would you praise God for the things he has done in all those situations? Yes. But can they distract where we lose our focus of him himself? Can we lose our perspective? Because all these things that I just mentioned are what? Passing away. I've just added on my garage. And every day I get closer. Well, some days I don't get closer. But you know what? The next person that buys my house will probably have more time in that garage than I do if they're more than 30 years. Based on my past health conditions, and I know God's in control of this, I probably won't make 80 years old. The next person, if they buy that house, will have more time in that garage than I will, if they're there more than 30 years. Keep things in proper perspective. What does he say? What do we get excited about? My question is, and I've had to ask myself this question, and I think God is working with me on this, do we get excited about somebody being saved? I mean, truly excited. There's something different about them. Do we get excited when somebody says, I want to be baptized? Do we get excited? Do you get excited? Do I get excited over spiritual victory in our own lives? Would that excite you as much as, oh, my uncle just lost me $1 million? A spiritual victory in your own life is what? Has eternal value. $1 million? Somebody else will probably enjoy most of it unless you just go out and blow it. I don't know. And again, in all those things, we can give credit to God for our blessings. But we can lose our perspective. That's what Paul is saying here. And be controlled more by our emotions, whether grief or excitement, versus eternal spiritual truths. I've already mentioned possessions. We've talked about this in the last few weeks. Paul says this in this passage again, though. Those who use the world as though they did not make full use of it. What's he saying? He's like, enjoy the world, use the world, but it's passing away. It's not going with you. It has no eternal value at all. How you use it and how you glorify God with it does, but the actual stuff does not. And I know we have to fight this in this country. It's against us on all sides. I think one thing Jen and I have to fight is, where are we going on our next vacation? We love to travel. We love seeing the beauty of his creation, but that can very easily become, if I don't get to see this, is he not blessing me? If I don't get this, is he not blessing me? Can we become more attached with his beauty, his creation, than anything else? And again, we love creation. I love creation. I love to see his beauty in creation. But do we keep a proper perspective? And again, this all points back to him. Where should our perspective be? Where should our focus be? Him. Him, him, him. It'll change how you live. I didn't mention this yesterday, but you want to talk about, I've just kind of started studying, and there's a book out there of Jim Elliot. Most of you know who Jim Elliot is. He was a man slain in Ecuador, along with 4 other men, by the way. There was 5 of them. Sometimes I think the other 4 get lost. He was a man that loved Elizabeth dearly. Was a great father to his only daughter. And there's a book that their daughter published. She found all their old courting letters and letters that they wrote back and forth. They say they were beautiful. But her daughter said, and I've not read the book yet, I want to get it, said all their letters always turn the focus to him, to Christ. Did Jim Elliot honor his vow in marriage? Yeah. He was 28, I believe, when he was slain in the jungles of Ecuador. I believe 3 other men were also married. There was only one single guy. They kept things in a proper perspective. Is that our call for all of us? No. But even we have to keep things in a proper perspective. So, let me just drive this point home of the passing away of 2 Peter. Turn to 2 Peter chapter 3. 2 Peter chapter 3. I think Peter says it well. 2 Peter chapter 3. I'll be reading verses 10 and 11. Again, Paul, before we read Peter, Peter basically says the same thing as Paul in different words. Paul is saying on a practical level, we need to keep things in check. On a practical level, the nuts and bolts of this life, because it's all going away. Whether you're single, whether you're not single, it's not about this world in its present condition. Peter says this about the end. 2 Peter chapter 3, verses 10 and 11. But the day of the Lord will come like a thief. On that day, the heavens will pass away with a loud noise. The elements will burn and be dissolved, and the earth and the works on it will be disclosed. Since all these things are to be destroyed in this way, it is clear what sort of people you should be, and in holy conduct and godliness, as you wait for and earnestly desire the coming day of God. Earnestly desire the coming day of God. But what does Peter say? He said the day of the Lord is going to come like what? Thief. Does anybody know? No. I wish people would stop trying to predict it. I think everybody predicted. I think God's up there going, oh yeah, I'll just wait another few days. I don't know. He's not doing that. He knows when he's going to end it all. But it's going to come like a thief. On that day, the heavens will pass away with a loud noise. It says in Colossians chapter 1 that he holds everything together. I'm not going to die in this hill. But I believe when that day comes, Christ is just going to let it go. He's going to take his restraining power of this world and say, I'm done holding it. Peter says what? It's going to pass away with a loud noise. Can you imagine the universe that is being held together and sustained by him right now? And he says, I'm letting it go. That's what's happening to this world system. Not just the physical system, but everything else. I'm letting it go. It's going to burn. It's going to dissolve. The earth and the works on it will be disclosed. But Peter says what? Paul says the time is limited. Peter says, since all these things are going to be destroyed, what sort of people should we be? What sort of people should we be? Christians should have a set of priorities that are radically different from those around us in this world. Again, I'm not saying don't build it. Don't rejoice in it. Don't love it. But we should have a different perspective. Why? Because of him, who he is. I think I will end with Calvin. We'll have to look at the other reasons Paul gives in the upcoming weeks. But I think that's good for the day, even though we'll be done early. Calvin sums up these verses well. He says, the sum is this, that the mind of a Christian ought not to be taken up with earthly things, or to repose, that is, to have a state of tranquility or rest in them. He says, the sum is this, that the mind of a Christian ought not to be taken up with earthly things, or to repose in them. We ought to live as though we were, if we were, at every moment about to depart from this life. We might be, as we all know. Are you living for this life or the next? He asked at the end. Again, this is Paul's opinion. And he's just saying in his opinion, if you are single, I hope I've shown the reason why Paul said this. If you are single, it's best to remain single on a practical level, not to get caught up in the world and its system. But whether you're married or single, let us keep our focus on the next life. And again, if we do that, it will radically change how we live in this life. Father, again, I praise you and I thank you for this truth in your word. Lord, I pray that we don't take either one of these things to the extreme. Lord, for those of us that are married here today, I pray that we will love our wives, we will love our husbands, and that will give glory to you. But help us not to make our marriages the end of all, because you are the end of all. Again, they are a picture of Christ and his bride. But that's what they're pointing to. Help our marriages point to what is coming. So people, when they ask, why are you different? We point them to Christ, just as our marriages should point them to Christ and his bride. Lord, if somebody is single here today, help them to really take down and evaluate, can I serve him in a different capacity if I remain single? Would it be better on a practical level to remain single at this season in my life? Or if I have the gift of singleness or whatever it is, Lord, that's what Paul is asking him to think about. Here's some reasons to really think about if you want to remain single. So I pray that those who are single will think about those things, but all of us will keep our focus on you. Help it not to be a list of do's and don'ts, Lord, but about giving glory to you, because you're the only one that deserves it. Help us all, I pray, for your glory alone. Amen.